Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. There was a slow march to Parliament Hill on Wednesday by families of victims who died on Flight 752. They're demanding that Ottawa take a harder line stand against Iran. The death toll from Hurricane Ian is now over 100 as rescuers are still searching for survivors in Florida. And Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf talks about a new initiative that will provide safe beds for Indigenous women and their children who are relocating to our city.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Family members of those who lost their lives on Flight 752 in January of 2020 gathered at the Supreme Court of Canada and marched to Parliament Hill on Wednesday. They were demanding that Trudeau Liberals take a harder line stand against the Iranian government. The Association of Families marked a 1,000-day anniversary of when Iran's military shot down the passenger aircraft, killing 176 passengers, including 55 Canadians.
It's the 1,000th day of losing my husband on PS752, and still we have seen no progress in the case. And we are looking forward to see the date of the court. And we are asking Prime Minister directly to move faster. But every day this case is postponing, and their delay cause more massacre from Islamic Republic. We got married just 3 days before the plane.
The main slogan for our revolution, women, life, freedom. So we are supporting that. We're 100% behind that. As an Iranian male that lived there for 27 years, we owe our women the freedom. We dropped the ball. They were prosecuted, they were prisoners in this regime, more than us, definitely more than us, and we owe them.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is urging Hockey Canada executives to step down after it was revealed the group paid out $7.6 million to settle 9 sexual assault and abuse claims since 1989. Canada's Sport Minister says the new Sport Integrity Commissioner should open a public inquiry to investigate a toxic culture of abuse in sporting organizations.
One of the conditions that I've set for Hockey Canada in order to receive at some point federal funding is to sign up with the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner. The reason why this is so important is that this organization has the power to do independent investigations on the culture. And this is really important to change what's happening at Hockey Canada.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted the Trudeau Liberals over the increase in carbon taxes. Poilievre says the current government is making life even harder for Canadians, especially for our farmers.
A farm family told me that they spent $12,645 on carbon taxes in July alone. Now, obviously, that gets passed on to customers. $12,645 in 1 month. Now the Prime Minister wants to triple the tax on that family, which they'll have to pass on, and even higher food prices, which have already gone up more than at any time in 40 years. How much will this family have to spend on carbon taxes when the Prime Minister triples them?
The Leader of the Opposition doesn't seem to understand that clever slogans don't help families. Investments in Canadians help families. Checks help families. That's why we were so pleased when he reversed his earlier opposition to our GST tax credit and is now supporting that direct support for Canadian families. Why will he now not move forward and support our investments to support low-income rental families, families with rental, and low-income families with dental costs for their kids? Will he support rental and dental for low-income Canadians?
A provincial politician in Nova Scotia says she's received hundreds of messages from constituents who are struggling without running water or electricity 11 days after post-tropical storm Fiona. Elizabeth Smith McCrossan says she submitted a list of names and addresses of vulnerable people to the military, which began performing wellness checks this week. Without electricity, Many homes and businesses in rural parts of the province have no access to running water because the pumps in their wells are simply not working. Residents in many parts of Florida are struggling following the devastation left behind by Hurricane Ian. The storm killed at least 105 people in the state, and tens of thousands have also been left homeless. So far, emergency officials have been able to rescue over 1,100 in parts of southwest and central Florida. Officials also said close to 700,000 homes and businesses still do not have power.
So we've now had more than 2,300 rescues, and our urban search and rescue teams with more than 1,000 personnel have gone door to door to 79,000 structures to check on occupants. This is something that's really, really significant. There's more urban search and rescue capability in Florida since this storm than has ever been in one place, in one state, since 9/11.
You know, rescuers have not only helped rescue people, but also parrots who were rescued from a Pine Island bird sanctuary after its owners refused to evacuate without them in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian.
We're going to try to crate up as many parrots as we possibly can. Get them to safety. They were short on food. Fish and Wildlife was able to get them food 2 days ago. So we're just going to try to get them all out. And they're going to probably be with us for at least 6 months to a year, we're projecting, before they'll be able to repair everything at the place they're at now, before we can move all the birds back onto the island.
It's beautiful to see rescuing the birds. Well, it was another beautiful day here in southwestern Alberta today. Many of us have been enjoying seeing the leaves changing color, especially around the Old Man River here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek of the forecast. Jeanette, the sunshine and mild temperatures should be sticking around for a while?
Yeah, they absolutely should, Hal, with the exception, though, of a slight chance of showers late this evening and overnight. And it will be accompanied by a northeasterly 20-kilometer-per-hour wind gusting to 40 km at times. Also, an overnight low of 2 degrees. But you know what? By Thursday morning, those clouds should be clearing up, making way for a beautiful sunny day, a high of 18 degrees. I'll be back later in the show with a look at that 7-day forecast for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. A special groundbreaking ceremony took place in Lethbridge on Tuesday. A new government initiative will provide 14 safe and stable housing units for Blackfoot women and their children. The families will be relocating from the Guyana, Siksika, and Bagani reserves. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf says the funding through the Indigenous Housing Capital Program will help to improve the living conditions for women and children leaving very difficult circumstances.
This is really important. We know that the First Nations people are a huge neighbor for us, and working collaboratively with them, helping their women, their mothers, their children, their sisters, their daughters, is a great place to start, and it'll have a tremendous ripple effect throughout their entire community as their that stability, that security, that safety allows them the housing and allows them that step back into that security where they can seek jobs, they can seek additional training at the college or university, and they can come back together as a family and regroup. It's a tremendous collaborative. The Blackfoot Family Lodging Association has worked tremendously hard to bring this forward, and we're just thrilled to be able to partner with them today.
Now, government officials say the cost of the project will be around $3.4 million and should be open next year. A special Indigenous ceremony saw dancers make their way into a Blackfoot naming event on Wednesday. The children of St. Martha's School here in Lethbridge received a Blackfoot name and celebrated by hosting a powwow full of bright colors and Indigenous regalia. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, children from 5 schools from around southern Alberta came by to enjoy the festivities.
A traditional honor guard procession was led by members of the Lethbridge and Blood Tribe Police Services. They were followed by traditional Indigenous dancers, Blackfoot elders, and staff from the children of St. Martha's School in Lethbridge. Indigenous dancers jigged their way around a circle, showcasing their best moves.
I encourage them dance as if no one is watching, and the creator's going to be dancing around with everyone and blessing all the visitors, and I appreciate the visitors coming.
The school was given the Blackfoot name Naduwadokoyes, which means Holy Spirit Lodge. Officials of the school say they're very excited to be able to receive this Blackfoot name.
I have to tell you, our elder Peter Strikes with a Gun and Jeannie Provost, his beautiful wife, Having them here and gifting us this name means the world to us.
It's tremendously important and such a celebration of culture and festivities from our First Nations communities. When we look at our school division, and one of our 4 board priorities, key strategic priorities, is First Nations, Métis, and Inuit education for all. So every opportunity to embrace cultural activities, language, customs and traditions, to be able to celebrate it, it's in our division is just a wonderful thing, and particularly for the children of St. Martha's School. It is, they are such a welcoming school community that when they're gifted with this opportunity, it's just a tremendous honor.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Alberta government announced $1 million worth of funding to help victims of sexual assault here in our province. The new forensic evidence collection training program will ensure that healthcare providers have access to providing sexual assault training kits to victims in rural areas. Jackie Armstrong-Hominick, the Alberta Associate Minister of Status of Women, provided some important stats on how women are dealing with sexual assault here in our province.
Often victims of sexual assault in rural and remote Alberta need to travel significant distances to access these services. Sexual violence crimes have the lowest reporting rate amongst violent crimes in Canada. It is estimated that only 6% of these crimes are ever reported to the police. At the same time, these crimes have a remarkably low conviction rate of just 0.3%.
Now, according to Stats Canada, the rate of reported sexual assaults in Alberta jumped 21% in 2021. The organization also said the rate of police-reported sexual assaults in Canada has reached its highest level since 1996. A 25-year-old Lethbridge man died following a collision on Tuesday night. Police say the man was riding on his motorbike. He was traveling southbound on Mayor McGrath when he was struck by a northbound vehicle turning west on a scenic drive. The man on the bike suffered significant injuries and later died in hospital. Neither the 46-year-old male driver of the car nor his female passenger were injured. The investigation into the crash continues. A grand reopening of the new Haunted Mansion at the Creepy Hollow tourist attraction will be taking place very soon. Employees have been working tirelessly to rebuild following the old mansion suddenly burning down earlier this year. Co-owner Glory Reimer says construction is going well, and they've added some stuff this year that will get kids pretty excited.
We're on schedule for how the build is going and how the rooms are coming together. We're currently staging some pretty fabulous new rooms, some new ideas, and people are going to be thoroughly shocked, surprised, and they're going to love it. We've taken extra steps this year to include our ever-growing Creepy Hollow family of children, because they love to go in there and they love to help. So we've included things that they can do, which will be scary and fun for everybody. So all the kids that come to visit will have something they can look forward to.
The mansion, located just outside of Warner, will be reopening on Friday. Canada's Environment Commissioner says our country is not doing enough to protect animals and plants that are at risk of going extinct. In his report, Jerry DeMarco calls out Fisheries and Oceans Canada for putting economic interests ahead of biodiversity protection.
Among the estimated 80,000 species found in Canada are the caribou, polar bears, beavers, and loons, which are depicted on Canadian coins. But Canada and the world are facing what the United Nations calls the Biodiversity Crisis or Biodiversity Emergency. Our reports today demonstrate that Canada's biodiversity is at serious risk, with the list of endangered, threatened, and special concern species growing longer every year. Some species, like the once abundant passenger pigeon or the Lake Ontario Atlantic salmon, are already gone.
Newly re-elected Quebec Premier François Legault says he will work with the opposition, but is ruling out electoral reform following the recent provincial election. He says he's also spoken with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as he looks to increase Quebec's power over immigration.
I think it's helping the strength of the mandate at 41%. I already spoke about it to Justin Trudeau last night, and I think we still have some work to do to make sure that not only that is supported by the majority of Quebecers, but also that it becomes a real priority for all Quebecers to stop the decline of French in Quebec. So I think we're in the right direction, but there's still work to do to convince the federal government to give us more power to select immigrants.
Well, we had sunshine mixed with cloud and fairly warm today, and the mild fall conditions should continue for the rest of the week. Complete weather details are coming up. It was so nice that we were above our seasonal averages for today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, those warm temperatures should be sticking around for the rest of the week, but we may also see a slight chance of rain tonight in Lethbridge.
Yeah, about a 30% chance of showers later on this evening, Hal. But don't worry, the skies are going to be clearing soon. Come Thursday morning, we're looking at sunshiny days for the next several days anyways. Thursday, high of 18 degrees. Nice sunny day on Friday, 21 the high, 21 also the high for Saturday. Mix of sun and cloud on Sunday with a high of 22. Monday, Turkey Day, we're looking at a beautiful high of 26 degrees and mainly sunny skies. Now, there could be a slight chance of showers overnight on a Monday night, which is Thanksgiving evening, into Tuesday. And look at that. That temperature is going to drop like crazy right after Thanksgiving Day, down to 8 degrees on a Tuesday. Now, according to the almanac, the average high for this time of year is, oh, that looked like the national. Here we go. Almanac, the average high for this time of year, 17 degrees. Average low, 2 degrees, 26. That was our high temperature on this day back in 2003. And back in 1957, we were sitting at minus 14 as a low. 7:37, that's when the sun rose this morning. Our sunset this evening at 7:02 p.m. Okay, now we're going to go to the national forecast, looking at the highs across the nation. Over on the west coast, looking at mainly sunny skies in Victoria, becoming a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon. 21 the high there, 20 the high in Vancouver, sitting at 25 inland, so much warmer there, also becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon. Edmonton and Calgary, beautiful sunshine, 20 degrees the high in Edmonton, 17 the high in Calgary. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we're going to see a slight change in temperature. This is where things get really, really different. Nice sunshine in Saskatoon and Regina, but in the morning, we're looking at wind chills of minus 12, climbing to 10 degrees in Saskatoon in the afternoon, 9 degrees in Regina, up to 5 degrees in Winnipeg. And did you see that? We're looking at a chance of flurries tomorrow in Winnipeg, or a chance of showers. So it could be flurries or showers, 30% chance there in Winnipeg. Toronto's high though, 22 the high in Ottawa, high of 23 in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. What a difference when you go from the prairies to that central part of the country. 20 degrees the high in Fredericton tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud. Halifax looking at 15 to 25 millimeters of rain, 40 millimeters in the heaviest hit areas. Also a risk of a thunder shower there. 16 degrees the high there. Same thing for Charlottetown, 16 the high. Could see a 10 to 20 millimeters of rain there and a 40% chance of showers in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow with a high of 14 degrees. There you have it. That is your forecast.
A large number of U.S. movie studios say that Ottawa's Bill C-11 could allow the federal government to meddle in the menu of films being offered to Canadians to watch at home. The Motion Picture Association, which includes Sony Pictures, Disney, Universal, and Paramount, told a Senate committee on Tuesday that filmmakers fear the online streaming bill could give the broadcast regulator the power to micro-regulate content on their platforms in Canada. Many Canadians, including Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, are concerned, saying Bill C-11 offers less choice for Canadians and more control for government. Energy ministers from the OPEC Plus alliance have decided to cut oil production by 2 million barrels a day to support sagging prices. That is an abrupt turnaround from months of restoring deep cuts made during the pandemic. The move could deal the struggling global economy another blow. But analysts say it's unlikely production will fall by such a big amount because members are already unable to meet the quotas set by the group. The World Trade Organization is predicting global trade volumes will only grow by about 1% next year. Experts say it's mainly due to higher energy prices and rising interest rates. The Geneva-based body says uncertainties about Chinese manufacturing output is also weighing heavily on the markets. The WTO is forecasting that the total amount of goods shipped between countries will rise 3.5% this year. That is up from an April prediction of around 3%. The outlook for next year is down from the previous forecast of 3.4% in trade. You know, winter's just around the corner, and that usually means higher energy prices, including electricity. Trevor Lewington is the mayor of Sterling, Alberta, but he's also a spokesperson with Ridge Utilities. Trevor says if Albertans want to save on electrical costs or not have to pay anything at all, they should seriously consider solar panels.
There's also renewable energy credits that you can get as a micro generator. So for example, I have solar panels on my home. In the village of Sterling, we're a net zero community. We have rooftop solar units as well as a ground mount array that generates enough electrical power to offset what we use. I can certainly use myself as the example. You know, I haven't paid a power bill since February because I'm essentially generating my own revenue. And I probably will be able to get away with most of the winter not paying another bill because of the credits that I've saved up. And for our community, for the little village of Sterling, it's made a huge difference to be net zero. It actually is a revenue source for us. So rather than paying power bills, we're actually getting paid to generate power, which is an important thing for our residents. It keeps our budget pretty neutral.
Trevor Lewington will have more energy-saving tips for us coming up after business news. A new survey by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says 40% of small business owners are not sure whether they will add a surcharge on credit card transactions to offset processing fees beginning October 6th. The report says another 15% of respondents say they do not intend to add the extra charge for fear of losing customers. Around 19% say they will add the surcharge, and 26% say they will add one if their competitors or suppliers do. The survey also found that business owners who sell to other business owners are most likely to add a surcharge for credit card usage. Business owners who serve customers, meanwhile, were less likely to do it. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 135 points on the day to finish at 19,235. The Dow was down 42 points to 30,273. The S&P 500 was down 7 on the day to 3783, and the Nasdaq was down 27 to 11,148. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.24 to 87.76 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 9 cents to 6.93 US. Gold was up 10 cents to 17.1636 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $20.64 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.24 per bushel, barley's at $9.53, canola's at $19.66, and corn is at $12.26 per bushel. Live cattle were up 48 cents to $144.68, feeder cattle were up $1.90 to $176.55, and lean hogs were up $3.80 to $90.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.44 US. Recapping one of our top stories, residents in many parts of Florida are struggling following the devastation left behind by Hurricane Ian. The storm killed at least 100 people in the state, and tens of thousands have been left homeless. So far, emergency officials have been able to rescue over 1,100 in parts of southwest and central Florida. Officials also said close to 700,000 homes and businesses are still without power. There are tweaks you can make to your home to help you save a lot on electricity. Trevor Lewington, who's with Ridge Utilities, will have details for us shortly. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Fort Whoop Up is bringing Spooky back with their family-friendly Spooktober event taking place October 29th and 30th from 1 to 5 p.m. Enjoy an afternoon of creating spooky crafts, live blacksmithing, fun games, Halloween candy, and more. Registration is required. Fort admission prices applies, and membership holders can enter for free. For details and to register, visit galtmuseum.com. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
As we inch closer to the longer evenings and colder temperatures of winter, our thoughts turn to family budgets and the need for an increase in home heating costs. It's almost certain that utility rates are top of mind for many, but there is a homegrown Alberta solution for this. And to talk with us more about options for less expensive electricity and natural gas, we are joined by a man who wears many hats, Trevor Lewington of Ridge Utilities in Sterling, Alberta, who's also the mayor of Sterling. Trevor, welcome back to Bridge City News. Great to have you on again.
Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to talking to you about this.
Awesome. Okay, so first off, can you maybe explain Why utility rates in Alberta seem so high right now?
Yeah, there's a number of factors that are influencing utility rates. Obviously, there's some global considerations. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has destabilized global markets, creating uncertainty on the European market, which inevitably trickles over here. In Alberta, we've transitioned a number of coal-fired facilities over to renewable energy, so wind and solar, for example. And when the wind doesn't blow, of course, that creates sort of peak demands and shifts in pricing. And after the pandemic, we've seen the economy come roaring back. We've got people traveling. We've got lots of activity in the economy, and so that's actually driving demand as well. We see things like electric vehicles starting to be present on our streets, again increasing consumption. So for the next little bit, we can definitely expect a lot of volatility in pricing. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see prices for both electricity and natural gas continue to rise.
Yeah, that is very unfortunate. And it seems almost like the cost was shifted from taxpayers to end users. So is this why we're seeing higher utility rates partially as well?
Well, so the previous NDP government had something called what they called a price cap. So it essentially limited rates to a maximum. The challenge, though, is that the people that generate the power were still actually getting paid what their costs were. So in effect, you had a fixed rate that you and I would pay as a consumer, but then there was a tax subsidy, essentially. The government was still paying those generators from just a different bank account, if you will. So at the end of the day, whether there's a price cap or not, we still end up paying for what it costs to generate the power. And so that how that shows up on our bill just changes depending on what government policy or programs in place.
Okay, and then is this change now costing the Alberta government any more or less than in the past?
Well, as you said, consumers are feeling the pain. We've seen build outs of transmission. So, the wires essentially that get the power to our businesses and our homes. We've seen the build out of infrastructure over the last couple of years. And so the companies that have built that infrastructure pass that along. We see that on our bill in transmission and distribution fees. We're seeing the impact of federal carbon taxes, for example, that show up on our natural gas bills. And so a lot of those costs get trickled down to the consumer, and we do see that on all of the various different lines that show up on our monthly bills.
Mm-hmm. What about inflation rates? Do you think that increasing utility costs are one of the reasons for that?
Yeah, certainly we're hearing from both consumers, residents as well as businesses that they're seeing increased costs, both for natural gas and electricity. And ultimately, businesses are going to pass that along to consumers in the form of higher prices. There's only so much that a business can absorb while still maintaining their margins and paying their folks. And so we will likely see those costs pass through in the form of either a higher price or a surcharge. A lot of transportation companies, of course, are charging more for fuel. And so it's the same kind of idea for our utility companies.
Okay. Now, the Alberta government has been providing $50 a month for electricity and natural gas costs. So do you think that maybe there's another solution that's a best course of action for this?
Yeah, so the province acted pretty quickly, actually, by getting that energy rebate program in place, and it's now been extended to the end of the year. So on your electricity bill, if you're a homeowner or you're paying that utility bill, you will see that $50 a month. There is also some cost relief for natural gas, although that program won't kick in October. Despite the fact that we have higher prices, it's not high enough yet to trigger that program. The government's been complemented by a number of different sources for acting quickly and getting those sort of inflationary help back into the hands of consumers. Of course, there can always be improvements that are made, but the initial response, I think, has received, a reasonable amount of praise for being quick and being directly on people's bills to reduce the costs out of pocket.
Okay. Trevor, can you maybe explain the government's regulated rate option?
Yeah, so the RRO, or the regulated rate option, is something that exists primarily for electricity, but it's also available for natural gas. And it's basically a guaranteed rate. So it's the default rate. So if you don't do anything, if you don't competitively look, if you just have power delivered to your house or to your business and you never ever look at it, you will probably be on the regulated rate option. And right now, we're seeing that option very, very high. So it's ranging somewhere between 15 and 20 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. That's an unprecedented level of price, actually. Whereas the alternative, there's many competitive energy providers out there, especially in Alberta's market. Often a fixed rate plan is much lower. And so you can see fixed rates out there on the market for typically these days, starting somewhere around 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So it can be as much as half of what that regulated rate option is. But The regulated rate is guaranteed. It's out there. Any consumer can get that. No credit checks are required, but it definitely pays to shop around and see what else is available.
Okay, well, with that said, Trevor, maybe talk to us a little bit about the concept of UtilityNet and Ridge Power.
Yeah, so UtilityNet is a Alberta company. They're based in Calgary, and they work with a number of different communities and groups like us. So the Village of Sterling formed Ridge Utilities a couple of years ago. It's a municipally owned corporation. And what we do is we market electricity, natural gas, and internet services across the province, but we're very focused in southern Alberta. And UtilityNet is the company that provides all of the infrastructure and architecture in the background to provide those services. So Ridge Utilities is one of 23 or so energy marketers in the family, and working across communities all across this province.
Okay, yeah, I know when we looked on your website there, it looked like there were many community groups delivering natural gas and electricity to Alberta communities, which is kind of cool. So what's the mission and vision of UtilityNet and your partners?
Yeah, so part of the reason we as the Village of Sterling formed Ridge Utilities was to provide ourselves with another source of revenue that was not tax generated. We all, as consumers, we all have to buy electricity and natural gas. We all need internet to do things, businesses, farms. We all need to buy those utility services. And so our theory was, why don't we buy that from a community-owned local company? There are many energy companies in Alberta, for example, that are based in the United States. So we'd much rather see those profits and those jobs actually stay here in the province instead of sending money away to another province or even to another country. And so that was our primary motivation. Most of the energy marketers that work with UtilityNet, a portion or all of the profits from those companies get reinvested back into projects in local communities. So it's a way of making sure we're giving back directly to where our customers live.
That's so neat. Okay, so how have the residents of Sterling and areas around southern Alberta like Lethbridge responded to this new idea?
Yeah, it's really been, once people, I think, understand our motivation, it's not a tax grab. It's not we're not just trying to be a rip off consumers. This is actually a competitive alternative. Our rates are very competitive to the market, and we're helping sure that those funds are reinvested back into the local community. We've had a number of other communities join us. So, for example, the town of Raymond, the town of McGrath have joined as marketing associates of us. So they're working under the Ridge Utilities banner and essentially generating revenues for themselves and ourselves as they go through that process. But we've seen very diverse groups across Alberta. So, for example, a competitor of ours, but part of the UtilityNet family in Calgary, is a company called Sandstone Energy. And all of the proceeds from their operations get funneled back to the Calgary Public Library. So it's a way of supporting the Calgary Public Library with this energy and utility service.
Oh, that's so cool. Are people actually seeing a difference, though, on their bills, per se?
Yeah, like I said, we offer very competitive rates.
Okay.
When you look across all of the different energy and service providers across the province, we're buying through UtilityNet in bulk with our partners. We're buying, a hedge several months out. So we're able to make sure we get the best possible pricing. And of course, consumers should always be looking not just at the price for the commodity itself, but also those monthly administration charges that show up on your bill. Each energy marketer sets its own administration fee, so there's an opportunity to shop competitively for that as well.
Okay, yeah, good advice there. Okay, so one group like Ridge Power recently started in Pincher Creek. So how can other groups start something similar in their communities?
Yeah, so again, there's multiple ways of doing this. The first option is to become a marketing associate. So that would be, for example, like the town of Raymond is working under the Ridge Utilities banner. Rather than having to go through the work of setting up their own municipal corporation, they can do that through us, and we both share in that revenue. Or if there's a community group, a not-for-profit, a co-op, or a municipality that wants to consider setting up their own corporation, their own brand, Headwaters is the one that recently was established in Pincher Creek, for example, then they can reach out to UtilityNet. The team there is quite happy to explain the business model and see if it's a fit. It's not going to be the right solution for everyone, but it's certainly something that could be a creative solution for many groups.
Okay, so one option that customers have is the Prudential. So can you explain what this is for?
Yeah, so the way the market works in Alberta is that the generators and distributors of power, for example, the people that own the transmission lines and get it to your home, they actually get prepaid. So we have an obligation as the energy marketer to prepay what we think we're going to owe them next month. They're guaranteed that revenue essentially. And it basically protects them as the generator distributor of energy that if a customer defaults on their monthly bill, they're guaranteed that revenue. So we have to put up what's called a prudential or a security deposit to those companies. So what we do is we allow consumers, our customers, can choose to put a security deposit or a prudential down, and that allows us to keep our rates low. Because if we're not covering the full prudential ourselves, if our customers are sharing in that, we're able to offer them a more competitive rate. So we basically have two options. You can choose a slightly higher commodity rate, a slightly higher price per kilowatt hour on your electricity, for example, with no prudential, or we can offer you an even better, more competitive rate if you're willing to put down a small prudential amount.
Okay. So one thing that's been in the news quite a little bit, we're hearing a lot about carbon dioxide lately, which of course plants use as food, but can you explain what carbon offsets are, and is this carbon the same as carbon dioxide?
Yeah, so that's a great thing about working with UtilityNet. As Ridge Utilities, we're able to offer two different programs. So one, first of all, is greening your power. So you can, for a small fee on every monthly bill, decide what percentage of your power consumption you want to get from green sources. And so that allows you to buy renewable energy credits that help encourage further investment in solar and wind projects, as an example. So you can green your power consumption. You as a consumer can help support more sustainable energy by supporting that program. There's also renewable energy credits that you can get as a micro generator. So for example, I have solar panels on my home. In the village of Sterling, we're a net zero community. We have rooftop solar units, as well as a ground mount array that generates enough electrical power to offset what we use. So we get paid for that, but we can also get credits for the fact that that is a renewable energy, and we can sell those credits on the open market. So it's fairly complex, but it's another way for people that have solar installations as a micro generator, they can maximize their return on investment for having that equipment on their home or their business.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. So obviously you feel that there are huge advantages to installing those on, say, one's personal homes. I know it's becoming such a huge market right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly use myself as the example. You know, I haven't paid a power bill since February because I'm essentially generating my own revenue. And I probably will be able to get away with most of the winter not paying another bill because of the credits that I've saved up. And for our community, for the little village of Sterling, it's made a huge difference to be net zero. It actually is a revenue source for us. So rather than paying power bills, we're actually getting paid to generate power, which is an important thing for our residents. It keeps our budget pretty neutral.
That's absolutely incredible. Okay, so Trevor, if prices are dramatically increasing for residential customers who don't have solar panels, what's the situation like for our local businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we're all feeling the pinch, right? So I think as individual customers in our own homes, we're seeing that impact on our bills. So I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone that the local business community is also feeling that pain. So again, I think it's important that both consumers and businesses shop the market, make sure you are doing comparisons, looking for the most competitive alternative. But then there's also an opportunity for all of us to reduce our consumption, right? So energy efficient appliances, changing to LED light bulbs instead of incandescent. There are small things that we can all do that ultimately will save consumption. And if you're not using the power, then you're not paying for it. So, you know, there's ways that we need to, I think, be creative collectively and look for ways that we can save money together.
Okay, so Trevor, there's something called the Utility Consumer Advocate. Can you maybe explain what this is? It's available to Albertans.
Yeah, so the Utility Consumer Advocate is an organization that was established and is funded by the province. And so that organization runs a website, ucahelps.alberta.ca. And it's really there to provide objective information to consumers and customers. It's not sponsored by any one particular company. It allows you, for example, to get information of what are the charges on your bill, how do you get more information. But there's also a great cost comparison tool. So you can punch in your postal code, you can identify what kind of package or rate you're looking for, and then it'll bring up all of the competitive energy companies in Alberta that offer those services, and you can kind of see for yourself and compare those side by side. So it's a great tool. There's lots of resources on energy efficiency and how bills work, and just helps people better understand the market here in Alberta.
Absolutely. That sounds very helpful, very informative. Well, Trevor, it does look like that's all the time we have for today, but thanks so much for joining us. Lots of information there. It's been great to have you on once again.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. That was Trevor Lewington of Ridge Utilities in Sterling, Alberta.
Most of us are aware that every church is imperfect and has its own share of difficulties. But should we perhaps pay special attention to those who regularly cause problems in a church? Today's guest will address this issue with us. Joining me from Central Florida is Pastor Mark Atterbury. He is the author of Troublemakers in the Church, Dealing with the Difficult, the Dangerous, and the Deadly. Pastor Mark, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Naveen. It's good to be with you.
Now, you write about troublemakers in the church. What do you define as a troublemaker?
Well, I think that's really the key question, because it takes more than just an imperfection or a weakness to make you a troublesome person. If that were the case, we'd all be troublesome people, right? Because we all have imperfections and weaknesses. When you get into a church, a person really doesn't become a troublemaker until their imperfections and weaknesses start hindering the ministry in some way. And I think it's important to realize that not every troublemaker in the church is a bad person. Not every troublemaker in the church, is trying to cause trouble. Some people who cause trouble in the church, they almost can't help it because maybe they're broken in some way. Something has happened to them in the past that has shaped their thinking in an unhealthy way, and that comes out in their relationships, and you experience difficulty and conflict in the church. Now, it is true that some people who are troublemakers in the church really are bad people, and they are there to cause trouble, and that's their goal and that's their agenda. But I want to be clear in saying that not every person who causes trouble in the church is really a bad person. Some of them are very good people. They're trying hard, but they have some kind of personality trait or some kind of brokenness that just makes them difficult to deal with.
Okay. And now in your book that you describe 25 types of troublemakers. And so why do you think liars are the worst kind?
Yeah, let me say something about that 25, because that's, when I wrote this book, I knew it was going to be a little heavy. When you're talking about problems and difficulties in the church, that's a heavy topic. And so I wanted to find a way to make it kind of fun. And so I decided to rank the 25 most difficult people that you'll typically meet in church, from 25 all the way down to number 1. Now, in most football rankings or basketball rankings, you want to be number 1. But on this list, you don't want to be number 1, because that means you're the worst person of all the troublemakers. And I did choose the liar to be the worst. Now, it was a hard choice because there are quite a few really dark and difficult people that you have to deal with in church. But what I thought was, Jesus said the truth will set you free. And if we flip that over, it kind of implies that darkness and lying and that kind of thing will enslave you and will put you in bondage. And when I thought back to the very beginning of time, to the Garden of Eden, for example, God created this perfect Eden, this perfect environment. He made 2 people, Adam and Eve, and he put them there, and everything was just wonderful. Everything was perfect. And Satan is sitting back thinking, okay, I want to corrupt this. I want to ruin this. I want to spoil this perfect environment, this Garden of Eden. And so what tool did he choose to do that? He chose the lie. I think he pulled the biggest stick out of his bag, and he went to work and he chose the lie. He told Eve that if she would just eat that fruit, she would be like God. She would know what God knows. And so he used the lie at the very beginning of time to corrupt, God's will. And I believe it's been doing the same thing all these years, all these generations, all these millenniums. I just think there's nothing worse than a lie. In a church, I was a pastor for 46 years. And what I found was, if people will just be honest and tell the truth, you can work through any problem. But if people are going to lie, if people are going to be dishonest, if people are going to hide the truth or twist the truth or shade the truth, then you're going to have problems. And that's why I gave the liar the distinction of being the biggest troublemaker of them all.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned that you've been a pastor for 46 years. Now, in your decades of being a pastor, have you come across all of these 24 different types of troublemakers at one time or another?
I came across them all at least 100 times in 46 years. You know, here's the thing. We open our front doors of our church on Sunday morning. We unlock them, we open them up, and we say, whosoever will may come. We invite everybody to come to church. Well, if you invite everybody and you don't have a screening process, you're going to get all kinds of people coming through that door. Inevitably, you're going to get some people who are difficult. There's no way to avoid it. It's impossible to keep difficult people out of your church. And that's why I felt this book was needed, because you're going to face these people, but a lot of church leaders, even a lot of pastors, with certain types of these folks, they don't know what to do with. They don't know how to handle them. But more importantly, the book talks about how you can be ready for them when they walk through the door by creating a healthy church culture. And if you have a healthy church culture, it will inhibit troublemakers from being able to get a foothold. And that really is one of the main purposes of the book.
Now, number 24 on your list of troublemakers is the church hopper. Can you just explain to us what a church hopper is and what exactly makes them a problem?
Okay, a church hopper is the guy and his wife, maybe a family. They walk through the door, they're all smiles, they look great, they shake your hand, they say, oh, we're so glad to be here at your church. We have heard good things about your church. We're so happy to be here. And you think, as the pastor, you think, wow, this is a great family. We're so happy to have them. But about 9 to 12 months later, they're starting to find things about the church they don't like. And they're starting to complain a little bit. And so at about the 1.5 to 2 year mark, they come to you as the pastor and they say, sorry, we're not happy at this church. We're going to try the church on the other side of town. And so they hop from your church over to the other church. Now, the same process will happen at that church. They'll be there about 1.5 to 2 years, and then they'll grow disgruntled, and then they'll jump to another church. And Naveen, I want to tell you something, and this is absolutely the truth. It's going to sound like I'm making it up, but it's the absolute truth. In 46 years, I have known Christians, church people, who have been members of every church in the town where they live.
Wow.
They've jumped from one to the other over the years. They've been members of every church in town, and now they're going to church in the next town over, 15 miles away, because they've run out of churches in the town where they live.
Wow.
And so this is the church hopper. They're never happy in a single church. They have to hop from one to the other. And what makes them a problem is the second half of their tour in that church, the second half of their time there, they're complaining. They're griping about this. And what they're doing is they're coming up with justifications for them to have to leave and go somewhere else. And so that's the church hopper. And they get on your nerves if you're a pastor, let me tell you.
Well, thank you for explaining church hopper, because when I think of the word church hopper, I think of someone who's either new to a city or new to church, and it takes a while to get plugged in and find a church that's right for you. And so you may go from church to church, but you're saying, like, when you're talking about like the troublemaker type of church hopper, they go for a while and then they find problems, and then they move to church to church to church, and it can actually be quite toxic, right?
Yes, they seem to be looking for the perfect church, which doesn't exist. And it takes them about a year or so to start seeing the problems that they don't like. And so now they've got to go somewhere else. But they're very difficult people, really.
I guess churches aren't perfect because we lack perfect people in this world.
Exactly. You know, the thing about the church is the imperfection of it and the imperfection of the people can be a wonderful thing, because it levels the playing field. You know, we're all broken in some way. We all have issues. We all have problems. And the church is one place you can go and be accepted as an imperfect person. And, a church is supposed to be a place of grace and forgiveness. And so that fact that we're all broken and we all have imperfections, it kind of just brings us together in some ways, except that there are a few of those people who are broken in what I would call malicious ways, and they actually are there to do damage.
Now, when you get plugged into a church, often if you have a talent, say the ability to sing or play an instrument, church can often give you a platform for that. Tell me, why do you prefer people with mediocre talent serving in church over big talented people with egos?
Well, yeah, that's a big problem. It doesn't seem like it would be. It's kind of counterintuitive because you think, boy, we want people with big talents. But big talented people often, not always, but often bring along big egos. And so the big talented vocalist in your church, if she or he has a big ego, then they get upset if they don't get the solo at the Christmas Eve service, or if they don't get the lead role in the musical, and so they start griping and complaining, and again, they're just difficult to deal with. They're not necessarily the kind of people who are going to destroy the church, but they're difficult and they add stress to the situation, and they make the church staff frustrated by their attitudes. And so, yeah, I would rather have people with mediocre talent, but who are truly humble and there just to serve, as to have huge talent people who are also going to bring huge egos with them.
I remember one church that I was attending. There were some people that were really well known in the community. Some of them were lawyers, and they were out in the parking lot, like ushering parking cars. And I just thought that is like just such a servant attitude right there.
Absolutely, that's what you want right there. When you get that, you've got something great.
Now, you say that we often make excuses for the troublemakers in our churches. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. Yeah, we make excuses for them so we don't have to deal with them. Because these people need to be lovingly confronted. And when they're causing problems, they need to be talked to. But if you're in a leadership role and it's your responsibility to be the one to talk to them, you can easily say, well, that's just their personality. There's no reason to make a big deal out of this. There's no reason to confront them because that's just the way they are. And I've been in churches where that was the approach. And so what happens? Well, that troublemaker just continues to do their thing, sometimes for years and years and years, because people who should be confronting them are just making excuses for them to avoid that confrontation, which means that if you're in a church, you need leaders who aren't afraid to confront. A lot of people hate confrontation and they'll shy away from it and they'll steer away from it at every opportunity. But a church needs leaders who are not afraid to confront.
And then on this topic of confrontation here, are there situations, or do you think that in some cases that their troublemakers should actually be kicked out of the church?
Yes, in the back of the book, the last quarter of the book, I talk about that and what to do when you have a troublemaker who is really wrecking the church and just will not repent, will not change, will not stop. And fortunately, Jesus gives a plan of action for that situation. And so I outlined that in the book. But the answer is absolutely yes. There comes a time when people need to be escorted out of the church for the sake of the health of the body of Christ.
Now, what do you hope that young leaders and followers will take away from reading your book?
Well, it really has two purposes. One is to kind of be a mirror, because we might all have some of these traits in us and not realize it. I got an email from one lady. I cracked up. This lady wrote me an email. She started reading the book and she wrote me an email and said, I started at 25 and I'm down to number 12. And so far I've seen myself in 6 of the troublemakers. And so, but I felt good about that, because that's part of the purpose of the book, is to help people see themselves and see qualities in themselves that maybe they have not seen in the past. And then the other purpose of the book is to be a handbook for church leaders. Like, what do you do with this person when he shows up in your church and starts causing trouble? In each case, and each troublemaker of the 25, I try to give a couple of suggestions on what you can do to deal with these people.
Well, thank you so much for writing this book, Pastor Mark, about troublemakers in the church. I'm sure we can see a bit of all of us in all those 25 different types.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mark Attenberry is the author of Troublemakers in the Church, Dealing with the Difficult, the Dangerous, and the Deadly. I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.